There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our event with Jenna Goldsmith. My name is Julie. I am the events manager at Roundabout Books. You may have seen my face on many of these Zoom events over the last year. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for continuing to take time out of your schedule to come on Zoom. I know we're all on Zoom a lot right now, and we do very much miss in-person events. I can't tell you how much I miss rolling all of the bookshelves out so we could put chairs out. It's just, I cannot wait until we can do that again. In the meantime, it is so amazing that we have authors who are willing to give their time to come on Zoom with us, as well as everyone who's here tonight to listen to our author. We love our community. We can't tell you how much Roundabout has been saved this past year by the people who are part of this community. We would not be here without you. And I just want to remind everyone that we are still open right now, limited capacity. We can't have people hanging out in the store, but we want you to keep coming. We can put books out on the red bench. We can deliver them with our OWL delivery, which we are still doing. So if you are looking for any book, please give us a call. We are always here to help you. So with that, I just want to remind everyone, you're going to be muted during the event so that we don't have any interference. If you have a question for our author, feel free to put it in the chat. At the end of the event, towards the end, we're going to open it up to people to ask questions, and I will unmute as we do that. And if you have any issues with your Zoom, you can always chat to me in that window to ask questions about just how Zoom works. But without further ado, we are so excited to welcome Jenna Goldsmith. And we had this planned a couple weeks ago on the official launch of her book, but thanks in part sometimes to these COVID times with shipping and whatnot, we did have to push it out. So again, thank you everyone for making this event. So Jenna is a senior instructor of writing at Oregon State University here in Bend at the Cascades campus. And she is also 1/4 of the Portland-based artist collective Danger Punch. So originally from upstate Illinois, she currently resides in Bend. And that's amazing. I'm so glad you're here. So I'm going to turn it over to you. It's your turn.
Well, thank you so much, Julie, and thank you all for being here. I want to say a few things before we get started. First of all, I have people here who are from all times in my life. And that is fantastic and also slightly terrifying. And so I'm really happy that you all are here. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. In some cases, I know there are some people from the East Coast here right now. So thank you for being here. I also want to thank Julie and Roundabout Books, of course, for hosting me. They are a wonderful independent bookstore in Bend, for those of you who don't know. As many of you know, independent bookstores have in some ways struggled during the pandemic, but in other ways have been really lifted up by their communities. And so I hope that you'll continue to support your local independent bookstore and continue to visit them in any way that you're able to right now. I also want to thank the press that published this book, Finishing Line Press. They're a fantastic group of individuals located in Georgetown, Kentucky. They're a small press doing great things, so check out more of what they're doing. And I also want to thank my blurbers. I read sort of a scathing piece on the book blurb just today. And so I felt this pang of guilt for even asking for blurbs. But then I felt okay about it because it's fun. If you're publishing your first book, it's fun to solicit a blurb. The blurbers for this book are Julia Johnson, who is a professor of creative writing at the University of Kentucky, and Jennifer Tseng, who is associate professor of creative writing at UC Santa Cruz. So thank you all for for supporting me. I also want to thank a couple of folks who really helped in the composition of this book. So the cover was just designed by Teresa Ashford, and the author's photograph on the back of the book is a photograph by a colleague, Kirsten Steinke. So thank you to you. And then those that have supported the process of my writing and the publishing of this little book. I could not have done it without the support of friends, colleagues, and family. And then, of course, thank you to you all. Those of you who pre-ordered, or ordered after the publication date, I want to say that your book is on the way. I haven't even received my copy yet because of COVID stuff, and then because of the very, very inclement weather in the South. The book was delayed in getting published, and then it has been sort of compounded in its being sent out and shipped. So if you ordered one, it is on the way, I promise. I'm looking forward to getting mine. Apparently it's in Missouri. That's all I know from the tracking number. So I'm like frantically checking my mail at this point. Can't wait to see it. Okay. So I want to say a little bit about the collection. First of all, if you're not familiar with the term chapbook, I wanted to say a little bit about what that is. I feel like that's kind of lingo that folks don't encounter necessarily outside of like a very niche literary community. And so this is a chapbook. It's a very short volume. Apparently, this is something I learned sort of recently. It shows up in 1824 originally. Fun fact for when you inevitably are on Jeopardy. And it derives from the word for itinerant salesman, chapman. Great, right? Like I'm an itinerant saleswoman of poetry. I'm totally embracing that new identity. Also, the first element of chapman comes from the Old English cheap, which should sound familiar. The modern adjective cheap was subsequently derived. And so it's a cheap little volume that itinerant saleswomen of poetry like myself disperse to the world. So there's your lesson in linguistics and etymology this evening. When I was wanting to put these poems together, I of course had to come up with like some kind of narrative. And what I was thinking, was how do all of these disparate ideas come together? What brings them together? What's the story that I'm trying to tell? And I sort of realized that each poem was a thought experiment on a different topic. It was a way for me to kind of think through this span of my life from the time I moved to Bend in fall of 2016 up until pretty recently, about 6 months to a year ago. The kinds of questions that these poems ask include, what is my place here and how do I fit into it? Who are my people? How do I make sense of myself in relation to a lack of familiarity with the people of this place and with the landscape and the geography of the space? So these are all the kinds of questions that I feel like these poems attempt to at least encounter, if not answer. So I'll start reading some of them now. The first poem that I'm going to read is actually the last in the volume, and it's the title poem for the chapbook. It's called Suppose the Room Just Got Brighter. Suppose the cherries on the neighbor's property were for us, so that when we snuck out in the dark, we weren't stealing. Suppose the door wasn't rotting from the bottom up. Suppose the wind. Suppose the green hose a snake. Suppose every garden box a garden. Suppose the room just got brighter. Suppose the vultures flying above the mudflats had an eye on our hair. Suppose the ocean was seamless rivers. Suppose the rules weren't so rigid, no consequences when I didn't follow them. Suppose there were no consequences. Suppose we ate supper and everything was exactly your favorite. Suppose supper. Suppose the direction you were running was west and I knew because you ran into the sea. Suppose I sat at the window and waited for you, awed. Suppose I saw you coming back. You were as wet as anything, sopping, still floating, very wet, simply walking up the street. Suppose I had waited there watching, struck. Suppose the room just got brighter. I sat in my high tower above the sea, and every wave a whale, every rock a seal's face, every clam and crab in communion, caverns in the bay, buzzards in and out, wind, toil, food, the sea, the tide, taffy on the table. Suppose the cherries under a midnight moon were ours. Suppose the moon, suppose the cherries. Okay. So the next poem I'm going to read is actually three short poems. And I'm really happy to be reading these because I started writing this poem in a workshop that I was in with Irene Cooper, actually. I don't know.
Can we do more top secret stuff?
I think somebody, okay. Are we good? Okay. Irene, we were in this writing workshop at the High Desert Museum. I don't know if you remember this. And I was like a disaster that day. I've had this experience over the course of my life. This is like several times this has happened to me, so I don't know what this says about me. But I've been like in this situation where I've had a fight with like a current significant other. And I've done the stupid thing of like being really upset and flustered and leaving like all of my stuff at the scene of this fight. And then like all of my stuff gets gone through, like sifted through. And I've done this like several times. I don't know why I do this. This has happened with like computers. Like we've had a fight. I leave my computer up and then somebody has like gone through my computer. Or we've had a fight and I've left like my whole backpack there. And the person has like gone through all of my backpack. It's happened like multiple times. So I think that this poem is like an attempt for me to try to figure out, one, how not to do this anymore, and two, like why am I doing this? Okay, so the poem is called Three Poems on My Backpack. 1, claim my backpack. Claim my backpack, reclaim your home. Claim my backpack, claim you. Claim my backpack, I'm you. How? 2, after she rifles through my things, poetry, wallet, receipts, I still go to the poetry workshop with strangers and write about my dead dad, Jeffersonian Midwest squares, and remember one day I'll be over this. Your pause in my backpack, the insignificance of receipts, the significance of half-finished poems, another matter altogether. You've discovered me in your rage and shame, in the way you never could when we shared matters more tender. Okay. The next poem is one I wrote after a terrible misunderstanding between myself and a song that I was listening to a lot at the time. At the time I heard this song, I heard this word in the song, and I thought that this was like the most charming word. I thought that I had heard it when I was living in Kentucky, actually. The word is wern, W-E-R-N. And I thought I heard this word in a song. And I was like, this, you know, this word means this. And oh yeah, I've totally heard that before. At some point I looked up the lyrics of the song, and that word was not in the song. It was like a totally different word. I had misheard the word. And so I wrote a poem about it. And so the word that I'm going to type this to everybody because I want everybody to see in the chat. The word that I'm saying is wern. It's not a word. It's not a word at all. The poem is called She Wern Mine. She wern mine. She wern here. She wern his. She wern theirs. Theirs wern mine. Theirs wern home. Theirs wern us. Theirs wern love. Love wern us, love wern she's, love wern I, love wern her. She's wern mine, she's wern together, she's wern us, she's wern come here. I wern hers, I wern she's, I wern she's, I wern come here. Here wern there, here wern here, here wern yes, here wern together. Together wern come here, together wern go away, together wern here's, together wern theirs. Like wern you, like wern want, like wern me, like wern do you. So word to the wise, I don't know. I'm really glad that thanks. Yeah. I'm really glad that I like learned that was not, it sounds like a word though, right? It sounds like the past tense of were. Like we wern together. I don't know. Maybe it is a word. It's a word to me. All right. The next poem is a total swerve. It's about a colleague that I had who passed away really suddenly while I was here in Bend. And some of you all might have met her or known her. I know one of you had known her. She was a colleague of mine in Corvallis at the main campus of OSU. The poem is called A Colleague Dies. A colleague dies of sudden infection. I am sad and don't know what that means. She was so nice. 3 emails between us and very young daughters. She studied sentences, punctuation. Who loves language that much? To my girlfriend, I whisper, I love you over and over, but just in my mind. Okay. Just a couple more. The next one, I'm going to read the next one, and then I'm going to show a video, and I'll read the poem, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the video for it. The poem is called Let There Be Light. I have known extreme gestures of love and no gestures of love both. Let the rose on the quad go along with me to poetry class in late afternoon. The contents of my dorm spilled, homemade poetry journals full of homemade poems ripped and returned. Then I save you from falling down the high school stairwell so that you might avoid damaging your perfect mouth. And you steady yourself only to trip again, and I grab your forearm and waist. This is perfect. The second fall was on purpose, but of course it wasn't, and you married a dentist and became one yourself. Be it the Louisiana heat and air unconscionably wet, we board a train away from graduate school to Chicago for a proper Chicago blizzard. On South Side streets, where I still might be, even now, dragging my suitcase in the snow. Light these first lessons that no matter how good the good can go, and a flash of blonde hair, wild down the stairs, outstretched arms, clothing and textbooks, wheels jammed up. Even now, I marvel at these most heartbreaking scenes repeating. So maybe this was a couple of years ago, the art collective that I am very luckily a part of, called Danger Punch, which is what Julie mentioned in my intro, adapted this poem for a video, for a short film, for an event that happens in Bend every year, called the 72-hour film scramble, where a bunch of teams are given a theme, and the teams have to create a short film in 72 hours, and then there's a panel of judges who judge the film. And we've applied to this like several times, and we've never won. And you might see why. We've decided that we are just going to like go for the experience of watching a film rather than necessarily than any kind of stable narrative. So I'm going to share the short film based on the poem that I just read. And there is a slight spelling differentiation. Originally the poem was titled Let There Be Light, THEIR, and that is, I amended that for the chapbook to reflect a more traditional usage. So I'm gonna do screen share here right quick. Can anybody hear that? No?
No, I'm not hearing it.
Let's try it again. Oh my gosh, don't look at the tabs. It's embarrassing. Okay, trying this one more time. No? I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Am I doing anything wrong? Maybe it's just not playing.
Hey, if you try closing the downloads bar at the bottom, there might be a play button or something down there.
Oh, Oh, you are so smart, Adrian. Okay. Well, I'll try it for one more second and then I'll get
I'll
back.
also check like on audio, there are some advanced features that talk a little bit about sharing, maybe if you have access.
Okay. I have another idea right away here. I'm going to send it to you, Julie. Would you mind trying to play it?
Not a problem. Let me see what I
Okay.
can do. And if
I'll
not, I
send-
can always put it up on the event page too.
It's so wild. I really I want everybody to see it. So there's a link in the chat.
Let me see what happens when I don't anybody talk about my tabs either. Okay.
If you would like to.
Okay.
That's it.
So let me share my screen real quick. Come on, where'd you go?
No longer hear from us, please press 3. Hello, this is the Hope and Prayer Center Ministry, calling today to see if you need urgent prayer. If you would like to have someone from our center pray for you, please press 1. If you would like to no longer hear from us, please press 3.
Oops, hold on.
If you would like to no
I
longer
accidentally
hear
started
from
it over. Wow, that was awesome.
Thanks for humoring me, everybody. So I will just say, I have to really briefly tell you about when we debuted this. There was this like huge field, and I was the only part of our collective. There's 4 of us who could make it to the screening. And it was, lots and lots of people were there because there were like 15 short films that were being put on display that evening. And I was the only one who went, and I just kind of was gonna like stand in the back and let it play out and watch the other films. But I didn't realize that there was like an MC, and at the end of each film, the MC had somebody representing the film like come up and talk about the film, which I was completely unprepared to do. So he's like, Danger Punch, are you out there? And I was like, oh God, like I have to go up there. So I go, and he's like, who are you? And I was like, well, I'm the poet. And he was like, oh, you're a real poet? And I was like, no, I just play one on TV. Like, what? It was, we also lost like bigly. So, but I feel like the real winner because I got to share it with you all tonight. So thank you so much for listening to that and watching it. You can find it on our website, dangerpunch.rocks. Okay, I only have one more poem, and then maybe we can chat a little bit. But the last poem that I'm going to read is one that I feel particularly proud of. It hasn't found a home. It's one of those poems that doesn't seem is not finding its place out in the world in a journal, but has found its place in the chapbook. And so I feel very, very satisfied with that. The poem's genesis is somewhat mundane, but it has really stuck with me. I was in a poetry writing group here in Bend for a little bit before pandemic things happened, and we would get together, once a month, and we would share our work. And one of the other poets in the group misspoke once and said something. I thought she had said, maybe I have a problem with understanding people. I thought she said heart gut, and she hadn't. She had said like heart something or something gut. I don't really remember, but she didn't say heart gut. I misheard it, and I was like, oh my gosh, heart gut is such a beautiful image. And she was like, I didn't say that. And I thought, oh my gosh, though, it's still so beautiful. Heart gut is, what is that? Like, what is a heart gut? And for me, when I'm worried or anxious about something, or am feeling stressed out, I feel like my stress resides in whatever it is my heart gut is. Whatever that is, that's where it winds up. So this poem is about the heart gut, and that's what it's called too. In poetry group, I try to explain how aspiration, inspiration, travel, inclination, listening, funding, working, closing the eyes, beginning again, pulling the drawstring tight, unfurling one's own flag to surrender, writing one's own story to quell the bother, rubbing the sharp edge of one's longing to round the fall, crescendoing a song, singing that giving up, letting the feeling of feeling. In the circle of poets, that's what the poem teaches us, that technically the heart can be left out, that technically heart of the aspiration, inspiration, travel, inclination, listening, funding, working, closing the eyes, beginning again, pulling the drawstring tight, unfurling one's own flag to surrender, writing one's own story to quell the bother, rubbing the sharp edge of one's longing to round the fall, crescendoing a song, singing that giving up, letting the feeling of feeling. Heart gut. Finding one end of the string and finding the other end and bringing the ends together to tie the knot. Recovering a memory, Virginia Woolf writing on an empty stomach, and how this translates into the ways in which we keep ourselves empty so that we may be women. Ruminating on love, always writing the longest poem, every day waking up to the longest day. The opposite of heart gut is heart outside of gut. Aspiration, inspiration, travel, inclination, listening, funding, working, closing the eyes, beginning again, pulling the drawstring tight, unfurling one's own white flag to surrender, writing one's own life story to quell the bother, rubbing the sharp edge of one's longing to round the fall, crescendoing a song, singing that giving up, letting the feeling of feeling. Heart gut. Can any place be home? If I put sagebrush in my mouth, will I become here? Sit me in a covered wagon, isolate me in the tall trees. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to questions, comments. I mean, anything anybody can think of, feel free to, you can unmute yourself, or you can do the raise hand in the chat function and I can unmute you. Just, let me know. Anybody want to go first? Irene? I'll tap you in.
I do want to go first. I don't get to hear you read enough, Jenna Goldsmith, but when I do, the things that always strike me and I want to ask you about are these sort of, these very ordinary moments that sort of echo the title of this book, about the room getting brighter. I can never get the image of just this wet body walking up the street. And I like even just that, just from a window, from somewhere, seeing this wet body walk up the street and just considering that. I just love the way you take your time with the language and then just roll it around so much. So I wonder, how does it come to that point of singularity for you? How do you get there?
Wow, thank you for that. That's an incredible compliment. One of the things that brought me to poetry in the first place was a book called Happily by Lynn Haginian. And I was not a fan of poetry growing up. I remember dreading that unit at school. Really, really dreading it. I felt like poetry was too hard, or it wasn't for me, or it was just not something I wanted to deal with. I wasn't a great student. It was hard. It was like math to me at that time. And then something kind of happened to me. It was like funny. Some of you will enjoy this. I went to community college in Rockford, Illinois, a community college called Rock Valley College. And I took a creative writing class there with a professor named Molly Sides. And it was a prose writing class, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed writing. We were writing nonfiction. And when I went to transfer those credits to Illinois State, where I went after Rock Valley College, you know, if you've ever transferred credits, you know that it can be kind of tricky. Even though I had an associate's degree, the English department at Illinois State wanted to see, you know, proof that I had taken my creative writing. I had to take one creative writing workshop as a English major at Illinois State. And I was like, oh, I already did that. I did creative writing workshop. And they were like, let's see the syllabus. So I gave them the syllabus and they were like, I don't know. We don't really have a class like that here. So you need to take another creative writing workshop. And I was like, okay. And I was frazzled. And the only one I could get into was poetry. And I had a meltdown. I remember calling my mom from the stairs of like where the English department was at Illinois State and saying, I can't do this. I have to drop out. You know, I have to drop out because this one class, I'm being forced to take a poetry class. And it's just absolutely the most terrible thing I've ever witnessed as a person. And I couldn't get out of it because, hello, adulthood. So I went to the class and the professor walked in and he didn't like say anything. And he sat down on the desk. This is like a television episode. And he sat down on the desk and he was like this Sicilian American guy. And he starts reading Lynn Haginian's book, Happily, which is real stream of consciousness. I mean, it's real, you know, our students think that they're writing stream of consciousness, but Lynn Haginian is writing like real stream of consciousness. And he like shuts the book and he goes, that's poetry. And we were like, I'm sitting in the front row. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I didn't know that was poetry. I didn't know that, you know, mundane experiences when translated in an authentic way could be poetry. I didn't know that poetry could be, you know, sentences that you might hear in your everyday life, but that when you know, put up against other sentences, create the context for something really unexpected, like matches on a matchbox. So I've always, and then I loved it. You know, I took every poetry writing workshop that I could in the next couple of years. And then I went and I did a master's thesis on Lynn Haginian, and I did my dissertation on Lynn Haginian. And so I just, I encountered, you know, very, very typical kinds of ideas and sentences. And I felt like I saw what they could do. And then I just try to do the same, I guess. That's a very lengthy, talk about mundane. That story is very lengthy and mundane.
I will say though, Jenna, I really love that because I think sometimes when we see people who write poetry books, maybe we assume, oh, you must have been writing this since you were a kid. You understand poetry. You know, it's inherent in you. And so it's actually nice to hear that maybe you needed to hear someone else's and then realize that was in you. And I think that's beautiful. Personally, when I went to COCC and they told me I had to take a math class, I cried. But no, that's great. Let's keep it going. Does anybody have questions about, I mean, even just the process of writing and getting published? I'm always excited to hear, you know, what that was. And if other people have questions about, you know, in these maybe COVID times too, is, you know, it's still exciting to see indie publishing for sure. Yeah, we're getting some thumbs up. Thanks, guys. All right. Do we have any more questions?
I'd like to hear a little bit about the cover.
Well,
Meredith is here, I think.
we have the cover designer in the room. Yeah, so I took this picture. The photograph is one that I took on the cover of the book, but Teresa Ashford designed the cover, fooled with the shading and the title. And I took the photo in Florence, Oregon. And it was really perfect because many of these poems, for those of you who are in Oregon right now, may kind of recognize this, but many of the poems are about, trying to like negotiate a space that's unfamiliar. And when I came out here from, I grew up in the Midwest, and then I went to graduate school in the South. And Oregon is a really interesting place because it has so many biomes. If you're in Illinois, you might encounter a few different biomes, right? Like you have a climate that you experience like near the lake. And then, if you're near the Mississippi River on the west side of the state, there's a feeling there. And then if you go down to Southern Illinois, there's a feeling there. And it's just, but it's similar. Like there's a similarity in all of those places, in like a place like Illinois. In Oregon, it's like you could drive for like 20 minutes and you're in a place that looks nothing like the place that you were just in. For instance, right now I live in the high desert. When I tell people I live in Oregon, they kind of imagine like what people here call the valley, which is the, Portland and Corvallis and Eugene, and very like lush and wet and green. But I actually live in a place that's not those things. It's very sunny here, but it's also very dry. Until I moved here and brought the bad weather, apparently it was very temperate. I don't really believe anybody tells me that now, because we get a lot of different kinds of things like hail and all sorts of precipitations. But when you're on the coast, it's like the cliffs of Dover. I mean, it's so, you have these like huge cliffs, and it's very moody, and there's like mist. There might be some like misting, actually probably will be. There's lots of like, there's seals, other like wildlife, like sea urchins. No, that's not right. What are like, they're like sea.
We still get a lot of like mussels and that kind of stuff that'll grow on the rocks.
Yes. And they have like tide pools and all sorts of interesting sea things. And so, like there's a lot of climates here in Oregon. And I think that that's really unique for a state, when you're in a state. And so a lot of like my time these last few years has been to try to figure out this place and all of the different landscapes that you encounter if you spend time in Oregon and you move around. And so some of the poems were written on the coast, and this notion of like, suppose the room just got brighter. I was sort of at the tail end of this relationship, and we had gone to the coast. We had a very generous offer from a friend who was in this Zoom room to travel to the coast and spend some time there. And there was this moment that I had in sort of like a lanai room where it was very depressing. It was like a very depressing moment where you're kind of like, oh gosh, like I don't know if this is like gonna keep going. And it was right on the water of the ocean. And the room just kept getting brighter over the course of the day. And I felt this sense of hope because of that. There was a feeling of warmth and a sense of hope in this room just getting brighter. And it, you know, it didn't get brighter. Like when we left, things did not get brighter. They eventually got much brighter, but in the immediate, they did not get brighter for me. So I, that's sort of where the cover is coming from. You know, I took this photograph at a more recent trip, and I noticed that, you know, like if I put my phone up into the air, half of the frame was clouds and the other half was this like really, really bright blue sky, and sort of the oddness of that at the coast of Oregon. So that's where the cover comes from, and it's really in you know, entangled with the title too, which you all maybe will see one day if the book ever makes it out of Missouri.
Yeah, they're holding your books hostage.
But I have to tell you before we wrap that the town that it's in Missouri, you'll love this. The town is called Earth City, Missouri. So I don't know if anybody has ever been to Earth City, Missouri, but that's where the book is. So.
Well, yes, we are expecting books at the store. So if you haven't already, please give us a call, pick up your copy. I suppose you could reach out to Jenna about having it signed. And in the future, we'll definitely have you back in the store for, you know, a live reading. And if you do write another one, of course, we'll have you back. This was great. Thank you so much. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. You know, the weather around the country is out of control. So thank you so much. I hope everyone is safe and warm where you are. If you do want to order directly from Roundabout, our website is roundaboutbookshop.com. Otherwise, please order from your local indie. We're all in this together, and we love indie bookstores around the country. So I wanted to let people know we've got some great events coming up in March and beyond. So please check out our event calendar. Even if you're not local, you are absolutely invited to any of our Zoom events. The more the merrier. So I think we've got hearts and high fives and thumbs up going all over Zoom. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Jenna, for making this time tonight. And this was a great readings, and I cannot wait to get a copy of your book. So
Thank you everybody so much. It was great to see all of you.
Well, thank you everyone. Until next time, have a great night, have a great weekend, and keep reading.